Great, and I'll just ask the team to keep an eye on the waiting room in case people start showing up. So we're gonna get started. My name is Giovanni Baez-Rose. I'm the director here in the planning department for the city of Lowell. Our community development team right now is without a team director, so I've been working closely with the team to get going on this year's funding awards. I do want to give folks a quick opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'm just going to ask you all to introduce yourselves as I see you on my screen. Betty, can you go first?
Hi, I'm Betty Ronsley-Arazo. Work with the community development team, usually reading regs. That's where you can catch me.
And Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Villatoro, and I'm associate planner here at the community development team also, and I'm trying to work at least on the reporting like SAGE and HMIS and help with the program, especially at ESG. Great, sometimes CDBG.
Thank you, Sandra. And Betty? Nope, you already went. Sue?
Hi, everybody. Sue Murphy. I'm going to be the one that will help all of you with your grant agreements and invoicing and stuff like that.
So for everybody who joined us last week, we're going to kind of run through an overview. So some of the stuff in the very beginning might be a little repetitive for you, but then the second part of this, we're going to actually go through the actual applications that you'll be submitting so you can get your eyes on those. We are going to ask everybody, since I'll be sharing my screen for the most part, it's up to you whether or not you want to keep your cameras on or off. We'll leave that to you. I am going to ask folks if you have any questions at any point to please drop them in the chat. So essentially what we're going to do is kind of try to run through everything so folks can see our presentation. And then at the end, we'll just go through the chat in order of the questions that have come in. The team will be keeping an eye on the chat to make sure we don't miss any questions. And then similar to what we are doing with the last meeting, we will also be working to get this meeting posted and available, the recording available online so you can kind of revisit it if you feel like you missed anything. So I am going to share my screen in just a second. Does everybody see that? Can folks see that?
I can see
Yes,
it.
Giovanni.
Okay. And it's big enough. It's not like weird and small. Okay, great. I get mixed up with
Good.
my dual monitors here, so apologies for that. So again, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're gonna have, we're gonna go review both CDBG and ESG. We're gonna start with CDBG first. So for tonight, as I said, we're going to actually look at the RFPs. I believe we've got some new applicants that are here. And for those of you who have perhaps applied many times for these funds in the past, they're going to look a little different to you. So we thought it actually was going to be worth your time to see the application and see the questions and the required attachments that we're going to ask you for, and then review again about some of the changes. So to reiterate what we said at the last meeting, there are a couple things that will be changing. The minimum award for public service projects that are going to be funded by CDBG will be $30,000. So that's going to be the smallest grant award for public service that we're going to be providing under CDBG. We are also only going to be accepting one application per organization for each funding source. So you'll have, you can apply for like one public service and one non-public service or one ESG under certain headings, but we need for you all within your organizations to figure out what your priority request is going to be. Because we're doing larger awards, it's going to be a bit more of a competitive process for, CDBG public service, for example. So we really need you to put in the application for the thing you want funded. We're going to leave that to you, but we will only be accepting one application. For obvious reasons, since we're going with larger awards, there will be fewer organizations funded under CDBG Public Service this year. You know, that's just a matter of numbers. There's only a certain amount of money we have, and with larger awards, that, you know, it just will reduce our number of awards we'll be able to grant out. But we think that the larger awards will mean that we're going to be funding higher impact, bigger projects for the community. And so we're actually really excited about this change. For the RFP process this year, we are going to be accepting only hard copy applications. There are going to be a list of documents, which you'll see when we actually review the application, that you're going to be required to submit to us as part of the application. And, you know, you're going to be kind of signing off that, like, yes, I attached all of these things. And it'll be really, really important for you to pay attention to what those required attachments are. This year, we're going to have to be much more kind of brutal, I would say, in our accepting things. So things must be in totally complete and on time. And so, you know, just encouraging you all to make sure that you're really dotting your I's and crossing your T's with your applications this year, because we will have to reject any applications that are not complete, or, you know, if they're a minute late, it's a minute too late, and we're not going to be able to accept it. For CDBG, you know, essentially we want to provide funding for programs that help create safe, decent, sanitary housing, provide a suitable living environment, expand economic opportunities. And these are HUD sort of federal standards for the goals of the CDBG program, and that they must benefit at least 70% low mod income people. Low mod income being thresholds that are, again, identified by the federal government. These are not City of Lowell standards. This is all what HUD expects us to do. And they set those numbers. And then obviously in Lowell or in various geographic regions, those incomes vary. So you'd have to know what, you know, the clientele that you're serving in your organization. And for these programs, 70% of them need to be low mod income. Your projects have to meet one of these national objectives. So again, benefiting low mod income persons, preventing or eliminating slum or blight. And then if there's an emergent, a sort of urgent need that poses a serious or immediate threat to health or welfare, that there isn't another resource available, CDBG can fill gaps. These are just some examples of eligible types of activities under public service and non-public service. So again, just to reiterate what I had said previously, if you have in the past applied for multiple public service grants, for example, this year you're only going to be allowed to submit one application. And so, you know, you'll have to decide which priority sort of project you want to apply for. Now, if you have in the past applied for both public service and non-public service, that would still be possible, but again, you would only be able to apply for one under each of those headings. And then just an overview of ESG very quickly. So ESG was identified to help sheltered and unsheltered homeless persons and those at the risk of being homeless. And, you know, the idea being that funding and programming should help get folks to regain permanent housing. Eligible activities for ESG: street outreach, emergency shelter, homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, or HMIS. You have to sort of work specifically with people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and you must be able to document that eligibility. This is a change for ESG this year. So again, this is something that I want folks who are particularly interested in that this pool of money to hear me when I'm saying that we're only going to fund you for one eligible activity. So where CDBG, non-public service and public service, you can apply for one of those sources. For ESG, you can apply for one of the following sort of eligible categories here. So if you're going to apply for street outreach, you're applying for street outreach. If you're going to apply for emergency shelter, apply for emergency shelter. Again, the idea being that we want to have individual grant applications be bigger impact. And so we don't want to have people, you know, getting only $5,000 for one thing and $5,000 for something else. Like, we want you to ask for a total amount that will help you with your organization's sort of which one of these eligible components you're interested in, and we want to have a big impact on it. So we'd rather see a larger request go to one item than you try to get, you know, $20,000 and do 3 different things with it. So that is a change for this year, and you will need to, in the application, make it clear which one of these sort of components you're going to be applying for. So I want to just kind of go over the big picture stuff. The application is going to be due on Friday, January 27th, 2023 at noon. City Hall closes at noon, or our office here in DPD closes at noon on Friday. So again, if you're running across the plaza at 12:01, it's too late. We will not accept applications that are late. We will have the RFPs and the application itself live on the city website this coming Friday. So that's Friday the 16th. By noon, the application will be live and available online. So, you know, we know with the holidays coming that we wanted to give folks some time. It's not a very long application, so we feel really confident that we've given everybody enough time to not only fill out the application, but provide the necessary attachments. So again, Friday the 27th at noontime, and there's really absolutely no budging on that deadline. So incomplete applications, again, we'll go over the list of things that you're going to have to submit to us this year with your actual application. We want you to submit one full copy. So one copy of all of the narrative and the application itself, plus all of the documents that we've asked you to attach, and then just an additional hard copy of just the application and narrative. So essentially two copies of the narrative and just one set of copies of all the necessary attachments. And then really quickly, and the team will also drop their contact information in the chat tonight for you to have it a bit later on. But Sue, Betty, and Sandra are the 3 that are available via email, or these are their direct extensions where you can reach them regarding any questions you may have during the process. And so I'm actually going to stop sharing this PowerPoint screen right now and jump right into showing you what the actual CDBG application is going to look like this year. Once I can figure out how to stop sharing. Okay. So we're going to jump right into the actual, I'm going to show you all the CDBG application first, so you can take a look at that. Once I find it. And team, I think people are still popping into the waiting room, so be sure we're checking that. Can everybody see the application? Can somebody on my team like give me a thumbs up?
Yes, it's a little small, but we can see
It's
it.
small?
A little, not like awful, but it's kind of small.
Let me see if I can make it bigger. No, that didn't help. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this is literally what the application is going to ask you. I do want to let folks know this is right now in a Word version. We are working with our MIS folks to help us create a fillable PDF. So on Friday, when the application goes live, it might look slightly different physically from this, because again, this is a Word document and we're trying to make this into a PDF, but you will, but as of today, we are not going to be asking you any questions that you won't see tonight. So the content of the applications are going to look maybe, the physical look of the application may be a little bit different, but the content of the application and the questions you're going to see tonight are exactly what you're going to be seeing in the final version. It just might look slightly different. Okay. Very basic stuff, you know, just your organization, what's the project, where it is, some contact information for folks in your organization, and then a very quick summary of the amount of funds that you're asking for CDBG and whether or not you have any other funding sources that you're bringing to the table, and then what the project total amount, and then we'd like for you to just calculate like what percentage of that project total does CDBG, your CDBG request represent. And then again, you'll need to identify which one of these sort of headings, your request falls under. You'd need to check which of these national objectives. Again, we had kind of discussed that there are sort of larger federal and CDBG goals that HUD has put in place. And so we want you to tell us which one of the national objectives your project is going to be meeting. And I'm going to defer to my team and make sure somebody yells at me, flag me if I'm going too fast, okay? This is all general information that we want from you, you know, very basic stuff. You know, what kind of organization are you? Have you ever tried to get these kinds of funds before? Have you ever tried to do a project similar to what you're asking us to fund? Or is this a new thing that you're, you know, this is the first time you're trying to do this kind of project? So, you know, if you've done a project before, we want to know that. If this is the first time you're going to try to do a new kind of project, we also want to know that. Have you gotten any funds from the city of Lowell for this project in the past? You know, because many of your organizations deal with a variety of funding sources, we do need to understand from you if you've had any issues with reporting, have been cited for any sort of issues with funders at the federal, state, or local level. We'd like to understand whether or not the thing you're asking for is a service that's provided by other organizations in the city. You know, with limited resources, we're really trying to make sure that our funds are having the biggest impact, and we want organizations to think really hard about, you know, are requests better coming in partnership? Should you be thinking about working with other agencies if what the things you're offering are so similar? So we kind of just want to understand from you whether or not, you know, what you're looking for us to fund is something that other organizations are doing, and, you know, let us know if you've done any work to try to think about how to work together and sort of make a larger impact collectively. Obviously, these are federal funds. So while we, the city of Lowell, distribute these funds, they come originally from the federal government. And that means that there's a whole lot of reporting that's required. And we really want to understand, you know, whether or not you have the capacity to manage and report. Are you seeking funds from other sources? So again, is CDBG, if you're looking for CDBG to 100% fund this thing you're asking for, or are you looking for other sources of funds? An example, you know, that something that I think we want you to keep in mind is that because there are timelines and reporting requirements, you know, CDBG could fill in a good gap for you, but, you know, if you've got a $10 million project and, you're only asking us for like $50,000 and you've only raised $1 million, that's a pretty far stretch to get to that 10 million to get your project complete. So we really want you to think about when you're asking for funds from CDBG, that they are manageable and that you have resources identified that can assist you with actually making it happen. And then here is where you'll have a chance to tell us more about your project. So it's really important that I think, and this is something that a lot of folks who've applied in the past sometimes struggle with, and I want to be very clear here. When we're asking you for a program description and the purpose of your program and the goals of your program, we don't generally want to know about your organization as a whole. That information, you know, if you've never applied to the city of Lowell for any funding before, you know, a brief sort of summary about what your organization is might be helpful, but we really want to know what you're specifically asking for money for. So in this section, it's really important that you drill down on the specific program you're asking for and not just provide us general information about your organization. And then here it's, you know, really, if you have gotten funds from us and you did not meet your goals that you had originally identified that you would be working towards, we kind of want to know what you're going to be doing this time to make that different. We want to see you be successful in your organizations. We want to see our funds go towards successful projects. And so we kind of want an understanding from you, if you didn't achieve your initial goals, what happened, why, and you know, what are you going to be doing this time around to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. We have a very basic budgeting system here. So these are the variety of things that you can use CDBG funds for. We want you to tell us what, how much CDBG, how much other funds, if there are other funds, what's the source of those funds, and then sum that up in the total. So again, we kind of really want to understand, what does CDBG represent in your project? What other resources are you bringing to the table, and what that total amount is? When you take that total project amount into account, you know, you've told us, I'm going to ask for, you know, X number of dollars, and we're going to serve this many people. So we actually want you to break that down. We'd like to have, that's what that cost per person served means. What is the cost per person served? How does that break down for the CDBG funds? So, you know, are we making an impact with $200 per person, $100 per person? Like, show us what that actual number is. So that's what we're asking you here in this line. Again, this is where you can tell us more about your organization. And we want to understand your experience with the program that you're applying for, the experience of the staff that you have that are going to be working on this program, your experience with grant management, state or federal, and then a summary of how your financial management protocols work in your organization. So this is your opportunity to tell us, generally speaking, about your organization and how you're structured and how you function. The previous narrative is really specifically about your project. And then, because we know that not every person who writes the grant is ultimately going to be the person that we're going to stay in touch with, we want to have contact information for, you know, we want to know who to talk to if we have a question about the program itself. Who do we want to talk to when we need reimbursements or paperwork for reimbursements at your organization? Who's the person we need to ask about a question of this specific grant? And so we'd like individual folks, depending on your organization, all of these might be the same person, and that's okay. But if you are in a larger organization and you have people that can answer these separate questions, then please provide us that direct contact information. So if we have a question, we know exactly who we can ask instead of having to kind of bounce around. And then whoever is authorized, your executive director, the board president, however your structure and signatory authority works, that's who would need to sign this bottom section. And then again, a signature for the authorized signatory. I'm not going to read through all of these, but there is a statement of the applicant, which is essentially, you read all of these things and know that they, it's kind of the information you're giving us is true and accurate and that sort of stuff. So, in signing the following page, you're kind of agreeing that you've read these things and that they hold true for you. A conflict of interest certification is also included in the application this year. This is actually one of the required attachments that we expect all organizations to provide us. So we have attached that here. We would expect you to read through it and certify that there is no conflict. And then here is your sort of checklist. And we added a signature at the bottom here because we really wanted to force you all to make sure you're taking one last look at this. So check at the box next to these individual attachments and ensure that they're included in your packet. When you're pulling together the final version of it, we need all of these things. They should all, for most organizations, you should probably already have all of these things. We don't think any of these things are really out of the ordinary. So we hope that you would fill this out. You can check the little boxes, you can do whatever you want to do, but essentially when you sign this sheet, you're going to confirm to us that you're submitting a full application. And that again will go back to if we're reviewing applicants and applications and somebody is missing, their 501c3 certificate, we're going to be very rigid about the expectations this year. We really need you to provide us the complete applications or they will not be reviewed. And that is the end for the CDBG application. And then you'll see in just a second, I'll pull up the ESG. It's very comparable. Some areas are very, very similar, and then some are, more specific to.
Giovanni, can we touch base on just a couple of things before we move on?
Yep.
There's just a couple of questions that have come up about, well, first of all, like construction related projects, and this didn't dawn on me, so this was our mistake too. We didn't include, there's a different budget that we would use for construction related projects. So there's been a few things that have come up about this here. So first of all, and Amy Weatherby from CTI asked about the timeline for the awards, the contracting. Is there going to be a reasonable amount of time to obtain the contracts, run the program, reporting? And, we know we've had those issues in the past. So I told her we could address that, but at some point we need to kind of have a timeline for people so we know what our timeline looks like. Then there was someone's asking about what type of construction related projects are applicable. It would be helpful to understand that, where a capital project might be relevant to the city and HUD funding. So we could use, in the past, we've had people apply for, different nonprofits have applied for this pool of funding in the past. They've had work done to their building. We've done roofs, we've done help with if they have a kitchen in their program that they're serving meals to the kids. We've helped with things like that. It's anything that is physical, construction related, that would be outside of the public service pool. So I don't know what I don't think we're having a limit on that. People can come in with whatever they would like to come in with for that. There's no guarantees. There is only so much to go around. Um,
I'm thinking maybe air conditioning upgrade too, or no? I mean, would
well,
that,
things like that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
things like
depending
that. I
on
mean,
who
but,
they serve.
we would also need you to be clear that your organization then is serving
yeah, like in this shelter
an
part, I mean,
eligible population.
yeah.
Right, like you don't get it just to get it. You have to meet the criteria, you have to serve the people that meet the criteria, and that's still something that we get reported on. So for instance, if you're a youth program that comes in for construction related funding and you want to use it for whatever, we're still going to ask you to give us the details on who was served by the program, all the demographic information, because we still have to put all that into the HUD database. Even when it's a facility project, we still are required to put in all the income, race, ethnicity information into the HUD database. Okay, what else we got here? We are new this year. Will bank statements work? Terry, I'm not sure if you are a new organization, you've never had an audit done yet. Is that what you mean? You haven't been around long enough to have even one audit? She's asking if bank statements would work. I don't know the answer to that. I guess we can find that out, though. We can do a little research. We never had that question, so I don't know.
Real quick, if you don't have the audit done, it would be that you should have a 990 form, I think it is, from the IRS, being a new 501c3. It would be whatever you're actually sending with the IRS. So that would be the form we'd need, not necessarily a bank statement. Okay, all right.
Do we know the dollar figure for what's going to be available for the non-public service?
We had it on the last one, right?
Yeah, I know, we
So
should.
the
I'm
way,
sorry, we should have had that.
way this works, and I'm gonna kill some time and hope somebody on the team can look up last week's presentation. The way this works, generally speaking, every time we are coming out with a new RFP for funding, we haven't gotten our final 100% allotment from HUD. So what we have done for many years is to take the pool that we had last year and adjust it by like roughly 5%. And 5%, give or take, is our estimate. And so that's generally what we say. So I think Betty typed in that we will have roughly $1.3 million. Now, we've been using this system for many years, and we are comfortable doing that because it has consistently remained the same. And so because our entitlement funds from HUD are based on a variety of demographic information, including population, and things haven't shifted very dramatically in Lowell, we've seen a pretty consistent amount of funding over time. So we're saying we have roughly 1.3. Did I see that right? Yeah.
Yep, about 1.3 available for the non-public service pool of funding. Do churches qualify? I believe that, yes, you could. We have someone that we fund that is a church. You just have to sign some paperwork for us that says it can't be, help me, Betty, please. What am I trying to say?
It can't be that someone has to practice the faith or you're pushing that on them in order for them to be in your program. So
Right.
if you're running a youth program, they should not have to come in and say, like, for instance, say a certain prayer just to be able to be within your group with
Right.
it, to receive any kind of assistance through your program. So it can't just be like pushed on somebody. They can't be mandated to participate in a specific prayer program in order to participate in the program. Did that make sense? Okay.
Are there more questions?
In the non-public area, are there priorities of the city that remove funds specifically from community funding? Well, that is the pool of funds that is used for city projects also, parks, different things like that. So sometimes, yes, if that's what you mean. Does the city take priority money out of that pool before they let someone else have it? Sometimes, but we could take it all if we wanted to. Honestly, it's not a requirement that we give any of that out to anyone, honestly, but we do because that's our mission, where we want it to help everyone in the city. So,
And to clarify, any city projects that are funded, we do require people to submit applications. So we don't just like skim some off the top.
no, right.
Just for city projects. So if there are projects that people want to fund, like a park project, for example, they would have to fill in a full application, just like everybody else.
The timeline of things is a little tricky sometimes, Heather. We'll get your applications back at the end of January. They'll be reviewed. The new fiscal year starts July 1. Our hope is to have everything in place and decide the funding and, we don't have specific dates yet on when the awards will be announced or anything like that, but when we get closer to that, we'll let everyone know. And ultimately, our goal is always to have the things done and finished as early in the fiscal year as possible. That isn't always the way it goes with HUD or with the processes. So we don't have any specific dates yet for you on our hope is to get it pushed out as quickly as we can.
And then the other thing that's going to change this year, and I do want to jump into the ESG application because I know we have folks that are specifically looking just for that fund. So I'll say this and then I'll share the screen and then we can get back to some questions. We are looking for timing wise. So we are going to, once everybody is funded and you got funded, we are going to we're going to mandate that anybody who was funded attend a post-award session where we'll walk through like, this is what's going to happen with the contract. This is the timing of that. So we'll have more information later on in the process and we'll be able to give you that. So again, we'll be able to walk everybody through. So if you get funded this year, that's another thing that's changing. We are going to expect everybody who was funded to participate in a sort of course post-award meeting where we can walk through some of the details. And we'll try to do it at a time that makes sense for most people. And if one or two organizations can't, attend at that point, we can have one-on-ones with people. But having that conversation with the staff, either on a one-on-one basis or in a larger meeting, is going to be a required piece before we would give you any grant contract information to fill out, just so we can make sure we're all on the same page about timing and expectations and who staff contacts are and all that stuff. So I know that please keep popping questions into the chat. I do want to just show the ESG application because I know people are waiting to see that as well. Okay, so ESG applications are going to look very similar to CDBG. So I, make sure that you're seeing ESG or CDBG at the top of the application and you're filling out the right thing. Again, this is all very kind of generic. And similarly, what I'm showing you tonight is a Word document, not a fillable PDF. So the content will 100% be the same when you go to fill out the application. It just might look slightly different because we're working on trying to get a fillable PDF that just is like a little neater. What type of organization are you? If you're applying, and we have had some collaborative applications in the past, this is where you would provide information about that. And if it is a collaborative application, we would need signatures from the authorizing kind of directors of each of those organizations saying that, like, yes, they are signing off on this. application. Similar, again, this is very similar to CDBG. How much ESG money are you asking for? Are you trying to leverage other sources? About how much that is? What's the total amount that you're asking for? And then activity type. So again, you're only going to be applying for one of these items, and that's where you would fill that in. The other thing that's important to note for anybody who's a new ESG applicant, ESG actually does require a one-to-one match. So you have to, if you are applying for $50,000, you have to have $50,000 of match to bring to the table for ESG. That is not true for CDBG. So that's an important difference between the two applications and funding sources that's really important for you to keep in mind. So when you're thinking about what your request is going to be for ESG, please keep in mind that you have to meet that one-to-one match. And so, you know, be reasonable with your request and know that, you know, you have to ask for something that, ask for an amount that you're comfortable you'll be able to match. Again, very general information about whether or not you've received funding from us. Have you ever tried to manage a program like this? Misuse of funds, we'd want to know about that. And then a narrative regarding your staff experience and grant management experience. So again, this is all pretty generic to your organization and just some general information that we're trying to get. We do want to understand about your organization's financial management. These funds, because our reimbursement basis for them, because the requirements that we ask of you, because our staff needs to go through reimbursements that are submitted, we really want to know that you have the capacity to provide us the information that we need appropriately. And so we really want to have an understanding from you what your financial management system is. HUD funds are difficult to deal with if you don't have a lot of really good kind of processes in place. And we want to make sure that that everybody has like realistic expectations about what we're going to expect of you if you were awarded, and realistic understanding of your capacity to be able to provide the information that we're going to need from you. So this is the opportunity to tell us about your project. Again, your project, not just your organization. So this is where you can tell us about what it is that you're looking for these funds to help you with. Tell us about the staff that you have, the population that you're going to be working with. Who is the target population that you're serving? You know, what's the expected number of households or individuals that you're looking to serve? And so this is when you're going to kind of have your chance to tell us about your specific program and what you're going to be doing, who you're going to be serving, what your goals and outcomes are. You know, we'll have a link to the consolidated plan available here. So, you know, we want to know, does your project match align with the goals in the city's consolidated plan? And again, this question about whether or not you're providing a service that's similar to others in the community. I think, again, in an effort to try to make sure that we're funding things that are going to have a significantly high impact in our community, we really do want to understand, like, who else is doing this? Are you in communication? What efforts have been made to work together to try to maximize efficiencies and make sure that things are you know, helping people and that we're filling gaps. You know, if there are 10 organizations all doing the same thing and nobody's like looking at another sort of issue that we have in the community, like that's just, I think, good information for us to have as a city, and good for us to understand what on the ground conversations are happening within the organizations doing work in the community. And so, as I said before, for ESG this year, you can only apply for one of these. And so we broke it down. So just note that we don't expect you to fill out all of this. You're going to fill out just the section that is relevant to the specific program that you're requesting. So if you're doing emergency shelter, this is where you want to fill your details in. Street outreach, homelessness prevention, they're all basically the same, but just we put it all in there since everyone's going to have access to the RFP. So just know that we only expect you to fill in the portion that's relevant to the program that you're going to be offering, and that there will likely be lots of blank space here. And then this is your opportunity to tell us about your budget. What are those details in the items that you've included above? And then again, this is the same form that we have in the CDBG portion, just again, because we know that your organizations are sometimes complicated and there may be multiple people. If they're all the same, that's great. Just fill in the same person's contact information over and over. But if there are different people that we should be asking finance questions to, or there's a different person who filled out the grant application, that's just kind of, this is where we're asking you to provide us this information so we can make sure that when we have questions, we can contact the correct people. You're going to be certifying that, the information you've sent is true. There's also a statement of applicant in ESG. This is almost, this is very similar to CDBG, but there are a couple ESG and homeless service related issues, things that are added to this statement of the applicant that is different from the CDBG application. So just be sure to read through that. I mean, like anything, when you're filling out a grant, you're certifying certain things, and this is what we're going to ask you to kind of agree, certify to when you submit your application. The conflict of interest certification, again, is going to be attached as a part of the application. Again, this is one of the expected attachments that you will need to provide us, so we've included it in the application itself. Same rules for ESG as it is with CDBG. Deadline will be the same, January 27th at noon. Complete applications, one full application with all of the attachments, and then one just application itself. These are all of the same attachments that we're going to require from you, and a signature, again, from somebody who's authorized to sign off. So we're just really asking you to make sure that you're looking at that list, checking off that you're providing each individual one of these required attachments, and then submitting the application. So I am going to stop sharing, and then we can jump back into some of the questions. Okay. I don't know who has been paying attention to the questions. So do you want to is it Sue or Betty? You're on mute, Betty.
You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Amy was just asking about the match for the ESG, because it's a one-to-one match. As long as it is a one-to-one match, it can be from a different funding, a different grant source. You can use, if you had the ESG funding for, say, $50,000, as long as you can match that at $50,000, it doesn't matter what source that money's come from, as long as there's a match in there to that you can document with your program.
And also to reiterate, to say that the match doesn't have to be all like cash dollars, right? It can be some
It can be in-kind services. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to pull up some examples in the meantime, but yeah, but like Betty was saying, yeah, so like cash, donated materials, buildings, volunteer services. I was trying to pull up the CFR for it, but I think at one point we may have a link, or I don't know. I don't want to put words in the mouth, but there's like there's a lot of details on it. It's just,
yeah,
it's kind of, basically it can be some volunteer services, but like Sue was saying, and in the thing, you just have to document what it is. Like,
Yeah,
we want to know.
you'll have to document what it is and the value of that essentially. So it doesn't have to absolutely be, you know, asking for $100 and you have $100 in the bank. It might be you ask for $100, you have $50 in the bank, you have $25 worth of, supplies, and people are doing all of your printing on your behalf. And then you have volunteers doing work, that's going to make up that was a totally made up number. I hope no one's going to just ask for $100, but just an example, like there can be a cash component. There also can be an in-kind contribution component. I don't know
looks
where we
like-
got the question, so.
It looks like Heather Prince Doss is asking, is there a rule for valuing volunteer hours? Not necessarily. I mean, you have to be reasonable, right? So if I'm volunteering for 30 hours, reasonably, what would I have received for pay? I guess would be a one way of looking at it, to be able to use the volunteer as a match.
Yeah, I think that if you have some part-time paid staff, or you have some comparable sort of positions within your organization that you pay people for, you could extrapolate your volunteer time based on that, sort of like what their like work market value for hours would be. I think, as long as, on average, your salaries range, I don't know, between $18 and $25, but every time you're, estimating a volunteer, you're saying that they're getting paid at like a $50 an hour rate, like that might jump out to us. So just, try to use numbers that you use internally in your organization for staff funding, and go from there.
Giovanni, Amy from CTI is asking about the organizational chart. Is it the full agency organizational chart, or just for the program presented for funding?
For like, I guess we should specify that for CTI is huge. So your chart would be like multiple pages. I would say we would want it for the program. So if you're at a smaller organization and your organizational chart can like fit on a normal page, then feel free to just attach that and maybe just like highlight the folks that'll be working on this particular thing. But if your organization is really large and complex, we essentially want to really understand the order of operations internally for you. And, God forbid there was an issue and we weren't getting it, having luck with people at the sort of first level, like if we needed to escalate something, who would we go to? And so it would be most helpful to have a breakdown of who is working on this particular thing. But again, we'll defer to you all. If you're from smaller organizations and your org chart's very straightforward, just submit that. You don't have to break it down any further than that. I'm trying to see. If you asked a question during the CDBG round and don't feel like you got an answer to it, and we maybe missed it, feel free to drop it in the chat again. I'm trying to also look at contracts are included.
Can I just ask a question out loud?
Sure.
More to make sure, I think I understand the answer, but it wasn't clear to me before I asked it in the chat. So this is, for the most part, it's really 9 months of funding, not 12 months of funding, because the funding is available September 1st and it's got to be finished by June 30th, correct?
Yes.
So when we're budgeting for this grant, we should be thinking about what we'll spend in 9 months, not 12.
Correct.
Okay. But you want to see an annual budget when we present the grant, when we write the budget for the grant?
We want to have a breakdown of what the total project will be. So if the CDBG funds only, you're going to run your project for a year, but you have to spend the CDBG down first, I guess, in the first 9 months. If you're going to continue to run your program with other funding resources, you can do that. So I assume most of you are going to have annual budgets. So if you make the decision to ask for, I don't know, I'm going to just use very basic numbers here, $20,000, of CDBG funds and you have another 30 or 20 even, so you have a $40,000 project, we'd want to see that you were using the CDBG funds in the first 9 months. And then if you had other funds, you know, that balance was going to be spent at the end or after our funds are sort of spent down, you can spend them down that way.
But the budget in the grant is an annual budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that you're understanding that these are reimbursable grants. So anything that you're doing, especially for the new people that are on here, you have to show us that these, with your backup, that the information, you know, that the stuff that you're invoicing for has already been paid, and, you know, whether it be for staff services or whatever, that everything's already been paid. So you're gonna provide us with the backup documentation, canceled checks, whatever, that these things have been paid in order to be reimbursed. So when you're budgeting, you want to take that into consideration, that it is a reimbursable grant.
So I'm going to follow up on that, Betty, because that, my point was, Sue, this is Amy Weatherby at Community Teamwork, is that for, especially for agencies that have not had the opportunity to utilize this funding, what you're asking us to do is present an annualized budget for a project. However, based on the timeline of the city, you need to ensure you have enough funding to operate the project, and whether it be a 1-to-1 match or a 3-to-1 match, whatever the presentation is, you're potentially in a situation where you're going to be operating your program, and then the city contract may come in a little bit later, but you are presenting a program in a year that then we can come back and show in a cost reimbursement manner that the city will then support those costs if awarded.
Correct.
Okay, because I think it's hard for agencies that may not have had that experience, where you have a city level of approval, and then you also have the HUD level of approval, but you're also running down the road of trying to operate a program. And then the city may come back and say, well, yes, now we can support you. And the issue becomes, you have to be able to basically operate that program and hope the city comes in with that support.
Well, there's, you know, realistically, there's only so much funding available. So obviously, everyone who applies is not going to be awarded. It's unfortunate, but there's only so much money to go around. So you will know within a reasonable time after we receive all of the applications, whether or not your project and your activity are going to be funded. So from then you can start to budget, and some of the grant agreements are usually dated from July, but that would only be like a summer program, and the others are dated from September until June. So from there, you would be able to budget what your program is going to cost you. Does that make sense?
Yes, except the
Okay.
challenge is you may be assigned an award,
Mm-hmm.
but you do need the float in funding
Mm-hmm.
Right.
to
Yeah.
support the program, while the city, and this is non-judgment, works through the process of getting those contracts in place.
Yep.
I think you need to be very clear with agencies that they have to be able to manage that float.
Yep.
To allow the city to align with HUD to get those, you may be able to, and I'm tentative about using the term backdate because that isn't what's happening, but the contract may occur while you're already accruing costs. You don't get the contract until a little bit later, but theoretically those costs, because they're aligned with the budget you presented, will be covered.
Correct.
I want to make sure that, especially for some of the other agencies in the community that don't have experience with this, that the ability to have that float is important.
It is. And
So
but one
Thank
thing
you.
I will
No, that's
also
true.
say though is that we, if you hear from us that you were funded, there's not a scenario where you're not going to get your contract too, right? So while we definitely understand, absolutely, Amy, point absolutely valid and well taken, that because it is a reimbursement, honestly, even if all of our contracts were on time and perfectly great, and you know there was no delay ever, we do still have an expectation that you have the ability to front some of these. You
Yeah,
have.
so, but
front these
Giovanna, the
funds
difference
together.
is between a 30-day float,
Yep,
which is what a cost reimbursement on standard is.
yep, absolutely. And so,
Right, well, 45 to, theoretically.
Our float, I mean, for us, I mean, with the experience we've had, for the others who are new, is it's about 4 or 5 months of floating. And that is for me as a small organization, is the very limit of what we can handle before we have cash flow problems.
Yep.
So I think other small organizations need to hear that. If you can't float 4 months, then this is probably not a good pool of money for you.
And we want to keep in mind too, that we don't even know what the actual amounts are from HUD until sometime maybe early spring. So we have to wait until we know exactly how much money they're giving us while it's being decided. In the meantime, while it's being decided, all of the applications are being reviewed. People are looking them over to make sure that they meet their national objectives if they're CDBG. Is it going to make a difference? Is it going to make some kind of an impact? There are so many things that we need to look at while we're waiting for that. And then once we get the go ahead from HUD, then we can make the announcements. And I know, like, sometimes paperwork gets tied up. It gets tied up in every organization. And we do the best we can to try and make sure that everybody gets reimbursed as quickly as possible. It's hard some days to, go through all that back paperwork. You think you like giving us that paperwork. We don't like receiving it either, but that's a requirement from HUD. So we have to go through every piece of paper that you send us, everything, all the backups. We have to verify that everything matches what you're sending us. And again, it's not us necessarily saying, hey, get me this, get me that, we're willing to work with each and every one of you. It's just, these are requirements from HUD and we don't have, our hands get tied on that.
so I think one thing that I think is important to keep in mind, and Heather, I 100% agree that, like, if you're new to this funding, it's not easy funding to work with, right? It's federal government. It's a little bit complicated. The other reason that we're looking to minimize the number of awards that we're providing is so that our team has the capacity to have some of those more in-depth conversations with organizations about, like, your reimbursements and the process and all of these things. So we are trying to balance making sure that we can give awardees the kind of service and attention that they need to be successful in utilizing these funds, which we had to make the decision to balance by reducing, frankly, the number of awards and the contracts and the agreements that we are managing. So we're in the process of trying to, like, make this as least painful as we possibly can. But ultimately, it's important for people to know that a lot of the expectations that are built into these funds come because they are from the federal government. And it is just a process that is a bit more onerous, I think, than some of the other smaller, maybe small foundation kind of grants and programs that some of your organizations might be familiar with. That, like, HUD is just, they have a lot of expectations and a lot of requirements, and we've tried to streamline the process as much as possible, but absolutely there are difficulties with using these funds that we want to make sure that people are aware of and prepared for. So I see that the team has dropped some information in the chat for you in addition to their contact information. I'm just looking at some new questions. What is the announcement date? What determines July versus September decisions in budgeting? We don't know what the announcement date is going to be yet. We have an expectation that we'll have all of the applicants in by the end of January, take some time over February and March to get them sort of reviewed. On our end, for the process needs to, be reviewed. The city manager has to kind of sign off, then it all requires a council vote, then we have to submit it to HUD. So there are a lot of steps, and depending, some years we're better at the timing than others. Last year was a very late year for us getting things submitted and in front of the council. We are very determined. The team's working really hard to make sure we're not late like that this year. So it's my expectation that we'll have a vote in front of the council in March. And I think last year it wasn't until May. I can't remember. It was late last year. So we're hoping it'll be faster this year, but also this team isn't totally in charge of like things like when it actually gets on the agenda and that sort of stuff. Authorized board signature need to be the president or the secretary. So your board, your like board of directors structure or your organization structure should have some formalized authorized signatory who is allowed to sign on behalf of your organization, who is allowed to execute contracts. So that's who we would be looking for the authorized signatory. I
If
think
it's both of them, then one of them is fine. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes it is both. Sometimes they both have the authority, but as long as whoever's signing has the authority.
so like if you have somebody on your staff that's like a grant writer, they're not necessarily the person that has the authority to sign the actual application. So just that would be on you to look at the structure of your board and organization and ensure that whoever's signing the actual application is authorized to do so.
And on a side note, if you check the Secretary of State website too and look up your organization, whoever's listed on that Secretary of State website, that person that you're having authorized has to be on that website
Yes.
also. We should have included that and I apologize. So our law department makes me print out that page from the Secretary of State website and send it with every grant agreement that they're signing to make sure that whoever signs it is listed on that page. So that's something you should all check. And if
make
it's
sure
not
you
up to date, it's easy enough to get it updated, I believe. So
Yeah, please do that because we've had issues where things have been kicked back to us because somebody, although they are officially authorized, like by, there was a vote of the board and they're an authorized person, that information hasn't been updated with the Secretary of State. And so we've gotten things kicked back. So please be sure that you're paying attention to who's listed on your board of directors on the Secretary of State's website and make sure that's up to date as possible when you submit your application.
Roberta was asking who are the decision makers for the recipients of the grant.
Yeah, so we have had, we're going to be we are trying to change the process slightly this year. So the city of Lowell has over a number of years had a CAC, a community advisory council, who's helped in the decision-making process. For the last few years, we have been lacking volunteers for that committee. And it's been incredibly difficult to get decisions made appropriately. That's something that the city of Lowell has done for a number of years and that we added to our process, but is not something that is required by HUD. And so we're actually looking to change that for this year because across the board, the city's had an incredible challenge getting folks to volunteer for a variety of our boards and commissions, and the lack of participation is making the ability to do the work just like impossible if people aren't showing up to meetings and stuff. So we're actually going to be asking the council to remove the requirement for the CAC. So it would be an internal process. Historically, it's been folks from a variety of departments in the city that have looked at applications in the past and helped make recommendations after the CAC has done their initial review. So this year we're going to be we're going to be looking to remove the CAC from the required process for the decision making for this year. And hopefully once we can get a new community development director on board, we can work on kind of reinvigorating the process for that, and hopefully maybe next year have a more functioning CAC. But in the short term, it'll be an internal decision, an internal group of staff from a variety of departments in the city, and then we make a recommendation out of the planning department. So I'll send kind of the city manager the list with the funding award amounts. He'll have an opportunity to review that, and then that list gets voted on by the council. So ultimately, they're the ones who kind of have the final say before anything gets sent to HUD. As far as doing the, so the process for like public meetings, when information is available online, when awards have been announced, the comment period, all of that stuff is standardized by HUD and will remain the same. We will be letting people know. There will be what's it called? Public comment periods that will be open.
30 days.
And so we'll advertise that. We'll let people know when that's kind of out in the world. So you'll still have an opportunity to see what those are and be able to comment if you choose. I believe that was the last question I noticed. I don't know if anybody else on the team has any questions that you've noticed. I think we covered them all. So I kind of want to just reiterate to people, the application itself might look slightly different, but the content that you saw today is going to be essentially what you're going to be filling out. We will have that live on this City of Lowell website. It will be, you can type in like CDBG or look at the community development page, but that's where we'll be. It'll be posted by noontime this Friday. So Friday the 16th. Applications are going to be due Friday the 27th of January by noontime. And the team dropped their information in the chat. I'm sure you can find us if you just look up community development on the city's website and reach out to people if you have any questions. We will be posting the video from tonight and the first session on our website. So when you're in the process of filling out the application, if you want to revisit kind of what we talked about in this session for some of those sections, you'll be able to do that. And I think that's all we wanted to say tonight. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate it. We know that these funds are not always the easiest to work with, but we want to try to make this process as easy as possible as we can for all of you. So reach out if you have any questions, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate it.